Good morning. We are inching closer and closer to the launch of the upcoming Piri 2.3 league, and yesterday I uploaded a video talking about the biggest winners of the most recent 0.3 patch notes. Since that video has sparked a lot of discussion around the overall tier levels of all the Ascendancies now, I figured why not do a tier list of where I personally see all the Ascendancies as of today and right before the launch of 0.3. Big disclaimer here, this is of course entirely subjective and mainly how I feel about a lot of these Ascendancies. In the end, we are still lacking some crucial information. I might be super biased on some of these, and I also would never describe myself as an absolute expert on any single one of these. So naturally, take this with a grain of salt. This is supposed to be as informative as it can be, but should absolutely not be the end-all, be-all of all Ascendancy opinions. Okay, so with that out of the way, first Ascendancy to be placed here will be the Invoker. In my opinion, one of the best and most flexible Ascendancies already in 0.2. And there is no reason to think that this will not continue in 0.3. Two of the Invoker Ascendancy nodes got buffed. The Elemental Expression skill overall does more damage now, and the Meditate skill got buffed by a big margin as well. This buff to Meditate probably is supposed to be a substitute though, because the overall overflow mechanics for life and energy shield got nerfed in this patch. But I think Meditate will still be around the same numbers it had previously, so still a very good Ascendancy node for the Invoker. Lead Me Through Grace is still one of the better nodes for me as well, with this node providing your Invoker with Spirit based on your chest piece's energy shield and evasion rating. Super good overall, but especially in early league when high Spirit gear pieces are going to be expensive and very hard to come by. The Sunder My Enemies nodes with its ignoring of monster elemental resistances with critical hits was one of the best overall Ascendancy nodes in the game in 0.2 in my opinion. This node might be considered to be nerfed here in a little way, since there is now a lineage support gem that just straight up inverts monster elemental resistances. So if that support gem is not going to be too expensive, that Ascendancy node would kind of take a backseat here. Overall, I still think this node is still crazy strong though, especially in the early league again. With the Hollowed Palm Keystone, there might also now be some more hugely impactful playstyles for the Invoker that this Ascendancy can benefit from in 0.3. So overall, I think the Invoker is still a very solid A tier. Next Ascendancy to be placed is going to be the Amazon. This Ascendancy got hit with a nerf in these 0.3 patch notes, with its best Ascendancy notable passive skill named Critical Strike being reduced to 15% from the previous 25%. This node being nerfed is in my opinion a pretty big hit to the Amazon, since I do believe this was definitely the biggest reason why this Ascendancy was as strong and widely used in the previous patch. Overall, I think this is still one of the better Ascendancies though, especially when it comes to high damage focus builds, and you can still expose weaknesses, have inherent skill speed, and can still infuse a weapon for even more extra damage on this Ascendancy. With the nerfs to critical hit chance and the expected additional nerfs to critical hit chance and damage bonus clusters on the new passive tree, I think this is going to be something that is also going to hit the Amazon pretty hard here. Overall, I will place the Amazon as a very solid B tier because of this. Next Ascendancy is going to be the Blood Mage. In my opinion, this is already one of the strongest Ascendancies in 0.2 and will for sure continue to top the charts in the upcoming 0.3 league as well. Even though the Blood Mage is already very strong in the current patch, it has received a few buffs in the 0.3 patch notes on top of that. Sanguinemancy not costing any Ascendancy points anymore frees up 2 more points on the tree, which is a very obvious overall buff. Gore Spike did get a slight nerf, but was made much better in my opinion because it was switched with the Sunder the Flesh node. So now you will be able to maybe only pick up the increased base critical hit chance that is much more valuable in most cases without having to pick up the Gore Spike node too. Another change in the tree is the change to Between the Cracks, which is now Sanguine Tides. It was a very build-specific node before and was now changed to just something that will most likely be more heavily used in a lot more builds, since it's just a straight-up damage buff to everything. With all the apparent changes to how spellcasting works in the upcoming league, with Grinding Gear games seemingly putting a lot of focus into that archetype, I think the Blood Mage will still be the absolute best pick if you want to play any kind of spell-based build. Especially now with the change to how much mana will be used with your spells and having the ability to use Arcane Surge for your life as a Blood Mage. This is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to beneficial changes in the next patch for this Ascendancy. My league start plan will 100% be to start off with the ED Contagion Lich early on, to go into one of the most likely very strong Blood Mage builds as soon as possible. But not only can this Ascendancy do spellcasting well, like in 0.2, there is also a good possibility that bleed builds will still be very strong on the Blood Mage again. So yeah, all of these reasons I think make the Blood Mage a very clear S tier pick. The Tactician will be next up. This Ascendancy also got a lot of changes in the 0.3 patch notes that switched up a lot of stuff in the Tactician's tree. Biggest focal point of the changes is, in my opinion, the nerf to the pin mechanic that made this build very good at locking down bosses with the ability to pin them and kind of lock them in place. I think this is still going to be possible in the future, but did get a slight nerf here in these patch notes. With the Warbringer, this is one of two Ascendancies with a focus on totems, and I think the Tactician can be pretty good at these types of builds especially. Not an expert on the whole banner mechanic, so any of you that can enlighten me if the change here is good or bad for the Tactician, please let me know down in the comments. Overall, I'm going to be putting the Tactician in the B tier. With the Blood Mage, we were just talking about spellcasters, so next up is going to be the Stormweaver. This Ascendancy was one of the least played and perceived weakest in Dawn of the Hunt, and to put that to a stop, there were quite a few changes and mainly buffs to the Stormweaver in the 0.3 patch notes. Elemental Storm is now better and on a lower cooldown, although I don't think this will make this used by a majority of Stormweaver builds still. The Force of Will notable was changed to now grant 20% of damage taken to go to mana before life and have a 20% increased Arcane Surge effect per 10% missing mana. Scouring Winds no longer grants exposure, but now gives all remnants, and that includes the Infusion remnants, the ability to reappear once. The change to Heart of the Storm notable is, in my opinion, the biggest change in this tree. This was kinda useless before and is now able to provide the Stormweaver with a 50% chance on gaining an infusion to get another one. Overall, there are a lot of unknowns here with this Ascendancy, since this one will entirely be dependent on how impactful these infusion interactions are actually going to be in the upcoming league. Since the Stormweaver seems to be the main focus when it comes to the infusion mechanic, if all of these fall flat, the Stormweaver will be again in big trouble. If the infusions turn out to be amazing on the other hand, this Ascendancy will definitely be the biggest beneficiary to these changes. I do think the Stormweaver has gotten some very nice changes here, but because of that uncertainty, I will end up putting this Ascendancy in the B tier. Speaking of uncertainty, the next one to be placed is going to be the Pathfinder. With all the concoctions getting changed in the current patch notes, how this Ascendancy will end up looking like is incredibly hard to say at this point. With all these changes that were laid out in the patch notes, it does definitely seem like GGG is putting a lot of emphasis on making the Pathfinder a worthwhile alternative to the dominating Deadeye. Sustainable practices got buffed pretty heavily, with now granting 50% instead of 30% evasion rating to grant also elemental damage reduction, which is an awesome change. And yeah, like I said, basically all of the concoction skills got completely changed, so that is yet to be seen how this will all look in the end in the upcoming league. Based on the performance of 0.2 Pathfinder, these heavy uncertainties and the absolute giant of a bigger sister Ascendancy in the Deadeye, I can at this stage only put the Pathfinder in the C tier, which will most likely anger the two people that are in love with this Ascendancy in the comments under this video. Okay, Titan time. I know all of the warrior mains were the main source of perpetual sadness since the release of the patch notes, but I think there is a light at the end of the tunnel here. The Titan is one of the Ascendancies that did not get a single change in their tree, which in my opinion is a very clear sign at how GGG thinks about this warrior. I said it before and I will say it again, I think the hulking form Ascendancy passive node is one of the strongest single nodes in the entire game. I kinda even expected this to get touched in the 0.3 patch, but to my surprise it was allowed to stay. I honestly think the Titan will end up being an awesome all-rounder Ascendancy again and not limited to strictly melee builds. Just like in 0.2, due to the hulking form just being an all-around great node for anything, the Titan can probably also be very strong on crossbows, spears, next to his usual two-handed maces. With what most of the community seem to be perceiving as nerfs in the patch notes, I think it is a very high likelihood the changes to the warrior side of the passive tree might also be beneficial to the Ascendancies and especially the Titan in the end. So my opinion, Titan, pretty solid A tier and probably the last bastion of hope to warriors. I'm kidding, stop being so dramatic, warrior mains. Okay, let's make a few more people angry with the next one. The Chronomancer also got two changes to the Ascendancy tree in the patch notes. The Flood of Echoes is now inevitability. It removed the basically never used Unleash skill and now gives curses the ability to store up damage and explode for even more of that damage after a certain threshold. One of the craziest node changes in the patch notes is, in my opinion, this upcoming one. The Quicksand Hourglass no longer grants 50% cast speed every 10 seconds, but now provides the Chronomancer with 60% cast speed, scaling down to 1% over 10 seconds, at which point it goes up to 60 again, and on top of that, the same effect just for area of effect. Definitely a crazy node on here, with the Chronomancer also being among the least played Ascendancies in the previous patch. Let's see if this one can breathe some life into this spellcaster. And now I am going to make the 3 Chronomancer mains in my comments extremely angry here. I personally think that these changes are not going to be enough to do that. Yes, the new sense of time is very, very good and especially much better than before, but it is still a very conditional mechanic now. You will have to time, haha, get it? Time? Your burst windows and what you're doing on this character very well, and overall I still think these Ascendancy nodes are still completely all over the place. There's now recoup, there is slowing of enemies and presence, we have a curse thing now, stop time, and sometimes get cast speed and area of effect. If an identity crisis would be a Path of Exile to Ascendancy, it would be the Chronomancer. D tier. Well, speaking of an identity crisis, another Ascendancy that may have one is the Gemling Legionnaire. Since everyone can now do what made this Ascendancy special before, this one is still up in the air for me on where I stand on this one. I think instead of calling it an identity crisis here though, we might be able to call this an all-rounder. Just like the Titan, this Ascendancy has and will always be very open to any build archetype, with its gem-based tree being very, very flexible. The problem that arises here is that the Gemling can do everything, but maybe lacks the ability to do one thing very well. Even the Gemling's bread and butter, the crossbows, are most likely be done better by Ascendancies like the Deadeye or even the Titan. The two changes to the Gemling in the patch notes do, in my opinion, not really put a dent into that fact, even though I think the new gem-studded notable passive skill is a nice substitute for the previous one. Gemling is going to be in the C tier with a very big draw to the B tier levels. One Ascendancy that can do everything well is going to be the Deadeye. I'm going to make this very short. Deadeye was already very strong in 0.2. The Tailwind Ascendancy node is probably one of the, if not the best Ascendancy node in the game. And the Avidity notable, which was used to one-shot pinnacle bosses with Wind Serpent in Dawn of the Hunt, didn't really get nerfed in my opinion. I kind of even think it might be a better node overall now. On top of that, the Called Shots notable got a slight improvement, and the Eagle Eye notable passive skill is now Bullseye. And instead of being kinda useless, removing the accuracy rating penalty on rage, it now applies 10 stacks of critical weakness. Am I reading this right? Yeah, what the f? Deadeye. S tier. Like, S tier. Okay, Acolyte of Chayula. Hi Darth. This Ascendancy got a full rework in the 0.3 patch notes, and the community seems to be very split regarding these changes. I've heard some people and comments describing this Ascendancy as still complete trash, and others describing theory crafting to make this monk basically the second coming of Jesus Christ. I think without having all the data and actually seeing the Chayula in the actual patch and in the game, it is going to be very hard to place this Ascendancy in any sort of tier list. I think with Hollow Palm technique and some other changes to how chaos damage might work soon, this is definitely going to be a very intriguing one though. So for now, as a placeholder, basically, I'm just gonna put this in the C tier. One of the biggest losers of the patch notes was the Smith of Kitava Ascendancy. Not only did the Warrior overall get some changes that might negatively affect the Smith of Kitava as well, but just this Ascendancy tree got a few nerfs as well here. The biggest nerf, in my opinion, to this one, though, is the complete removal of the absolute best in slot and easy to acquire belt for the Smith of Kitava, the Inferno class belt. I did think this was one of the better Ascendancies in the previous patch, especially in hardcore and solo self-found. Overall, I think this one was hit a bit too hard though, so for now, I'm going to put this in the D tier. Infernalist got a change to it as well in the most recent patch notes, with the demon form now being able to scale off of your weapon. Overall, the changes in the notes have been positive. It is yet to be seen though how these will look inside of the game, and especially concerning the demon form, there is still a lot of math to be done here. With the buffs to minions and the possibility of much better usage of fire spells in general though, I honestly think that the Infernalist has some great possibilities here in the upcoming league. So with that, I think B tier is an absolute possibility here. The Witch Hunter also benefited a lot from overall changes in the patch notes, although absolutely nothing was changed about this Ascendancy in its own tree. Also, one of the least played Ascendancies in Dawn of the Hunt League, the changes to crossbow skills, the removed movement speed penalty, and the lower downtime after reloading will 100% be a nice change for the Witch Hunter as well. I think the biggest upside for this one though is the change to weapon switching in 0.3. There is now absolutely no delay in swapping your weapons from set 1 to set 2, and the Witch Hunter is, in my opinion, the biggest beneficiary of that with its 20 extra weapon set skill points. I think in the end, this makes the Witch Hunter a little bit better than before, so he's gonna get comfy in the C tier here. Second to last one is going to be the Warbringer. This guy also got a rework on its Ascendancy with the overall changes to max block and how it functions now. The Warbringer needed some changes in its Ascendancy tree as a result of that. This Ascendancy will again be most likely very totem and block based and will probably have some people very excited about the defensive capabilities. I personally think with the overall changes to Warrior, this does not go higher than low C tier for me. Last but not least is going to be the Ritualist. I think this one went a little bit under the radar in the previous league with the Amazon being the dominating Ascendancy for the Huntress. But I really think this one is still a very nice all-rounder Ascendancy once again. A lot of people often describe this as only really viable because of the rarity bot capabilities, but I really think the Ritualist has some very cool things to offer for a lot of different build archetypes. It also got 2 small changes that benefited the Ritualist in the patch note changes, so I do think the Ritualist overall will take the lowest A tier spot in this list. Okay, so that will be the finished tier list right here. Let me know in the comments how angry you are about some of the tiers I have given here. But like I said, this is not meant to be an absolutely objective, factual expression of what is actually good and what is not. This was at the foremost meant to be informative in nature, with me just expressing my general thoughts on all of the Ascendancies. Okay. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to follow my league start and what I will be doing starting on the 29th of August, go follow my stream that is linked in the description of this video. I'm streaming Path of Exile 2 every single day and will especially go hard on the upcoming league. I'll see you on the next one. Love you. Bye.